Hello, my name is Elena Vance, and I have always believed that true luxury is not found in a price tag, but in the way a person is made to feel when they walk through a door. Over the last decade, I built my brand, Vance & Co., on that very principle. I started with a small boutique on a quiet corner, and through years of tireless dedication, I expanded it into a high-end fashion empire. My flagship store, a glass-fronted sanctuary of marble and silk in the heart of the city, is my greatest pride. I spent months training my staff to treat every visitor with the same dignity, whether they were buying a silk scarf or a bespoke gown. I wanted my stores to be places of elegance, not exclusion. On a drizzly Tuesday afternoon, I decided to visit the flagship store unannounced. I had been traveling for weeks, scouting new textiles in Europe, and I felt a deep longing to reconnect with the heart of my business. I was dressed for comfort rather than status, wearing an oversized beige trench coat that had seen better days, a pair of simple leggings, and sneakers splattered with a bit of mud from the park. My hair was tucked under a plain wool cap, and I carried a nondescript canvas bag filled with fabric samples. To anyone passing by, I looked like a tired commuter seeking shelter from the rain, not the CEO of the company whose name was etched in gold above the entrance. As I pushed open the heavy brass doors, the familiar scent of sandalwood and expensive leather greeted me. The store was quiet, bathed in the soft, warm glow of recessed lighting. I took a moment to admire the way the light caught the fall collection, feeling a swell of satisfaction at the craftsmanship. I moved toward the back of the store, where the most exclusive evening wear was displayed on minimalist mannequins. I wanted to feel the weight of the new midnight blue velvet gown we had just launched. I hadn't been standing there for more than a minute when I felt a cold, sharp presence behind me. I turned to find a young woman I didn't recognize, a new hire, likely brought on during my absence. She was impeccably dressed in a sharp black suit, her hair pulled back into a bun so tight it seemed to pull at her eyes. She didn't offer a smile or a greeting. Instead, she looked at my muddy sneakers and my canvas bag with a look of profound, unfiltered disgust. She folded her arms across her chest, creating a physical barrier between me and the gowns. Without a single word of welcome, she stepped closer, her perfume cloying and aggressive. She made a subtle shooing motion with her hand, as if she were clearing away a stray leaf that had blown in from the street. She positioned herself directly in front of the velvet dress, blocking my view. Her gaze swept over my worn coat once more, and she tilted her chin upward, looking down her nose at me with an air of immense superiority. It was the kind of look designed to make a person feel small, invisible, and unwelcome. I stood my ground, curious to see how far this would go. I reached out a hand toward a rack of silk blouses, intending to check the stitching. Before my fingers could even graze the fabric, she moved with startling speed, snapping a pair of white gloves onto her hands and stepping into my path. She didn't speak, but her body language was screaming. She adjusted the hangers with exaggerated care, as if my mere presence had somehow contaminated the air around the clothes. She pointedly looked toward the exit, then back at me, her eyes narrowed in a silent command to leave. The irony was not lost on me. Here was a woman I was paying a generous salary, standing in a building I owned, surrounded by products I had designed, attempting to exile me from my own creation because I didn't meet her superficial standards of wealth. I thought of the countless hours I had spent writing the employee handbook, emphasizing that we never judge a book by its cover. I thought of the secret shoppers I used to hire to ensure that no one was ever treated with such coldness. Somewhere in my absence, the culture I had cultivated had begun to rot. She then took a small velvet rope from a nearby display and hooked it across the entrance to the high-end suite, effectively barring me from entering the most expensive section of the store. She stood behind the rope like a sentry, her expression one of smug triumph. She began to polish a glass countertop, buffing it with such intensity that it felt like an insult. Every few seconds, she would glance up to see if I was still there, her lips curled in a faint, mocking sneer. She was enjoying the power she thought she held. I realized then that this wasn't just about one rude employee. It was a failure of the system I had put in place. If she felt comfortable treating a stranger this way, she had likely done it before to others, to potential customers who might have become lifelong patrons, or to people who simply wanted to admire something beautiful. She was dismantling the reputation of Vance & Co., one silent insult at a time. I felt a surge of cold, quiet anger, but I didn't let it show on my face. I remained as calm and unremarkable as the rain outside. I reached into my canvas bag and pulled out my phone. I saw her eyes widen slightly, perhaps thinking I was going to try to take a photo of the clothes I couldn't afford. I ignored her and sent a short, simple text to the store manager, Sarah, who was currently in the basement office. I told her I was on the floor and to come up immediately, but to remain quiet. I watched as the young woman behind the velvet rope checked her own watch, clearly counting the seconds until I gave up and slunk away in shame. Moments later, the elevator at the back of the store hissed open. Sarah stepped out, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on me. She began to walk over with a bright, professional smile, but as she got closer and recognized me in my disheveled state, her expression shifted to one of pure shock. The new employee, seeing the manager approach, stood even taller, pointing a gloved finger toward me as if to alert Sarah to the problem she was so diligently handling. She seemed to expect praise for her vigilance. The silence in the store was absolute as Sarah reached the velvet rope. The young woman began to make a frantic, hushed gesture toward me, her face contorted in a silent plea for the manager to remove the intruder. Sarah didn't look at her. Instead, she unhooked the rope with a trembling hand and stepped aside, bowing her head slightly in a gesture of deep respect. The color drained from the new employee's face so quickly she looked as though she might faint. The smugness vanished, replaced by a haunting, wide-eyed realization of the magnitude of her mistake. I didn't say anything to the girl. I didn't need to. I simply took off my wet trench coat and handed it to her. The weight of the coat seemed to pull her shoulders down, or perhaps it was just the weight of her crumbling career. I walked past her into the suite she had tried to protect from me, feeling the soft carpet beneath my sneakers. I ran my hand over the blue velvet gown, the fabric cool and smooth against my skin. I looked back at her one last time from the center of the room. She was still standing there, clutching my old coat, her mouth slightly agape as she watched the tired commuter transform into the woman who signed her paychecks. I turned to Sarah and gave a small, weary nod. We both knew what had to happen next. I walked toward the private office, leaving the silence behind me. I had built an empire on the idea that everyone deserved a seat at the table, and I would not allow a single person to turn my dream into a fortress of arrogance. As I closed the office door, I felt a strange sense of peace. I had come to my store looking for a connection to my work, and I had found it. I had found a reminder of why I started this journey in the first place, to fight against the very elitism that had just tried to show me the door.